So the major concept with labor advantage is the idea that we want to pay people to produce output versus producing hours. So we want to get into the mindset of the worker and try and transform it more into an individual business owner, right? So if you think about what would be the differences between a business owner and a frontline worker? I know some of them are pretty obvious right away, but like what are some of the differences in the mindset? How would you begin to transition a worker into a business mindset, into an entrepreneurial mindset, into a self-driven, self-motivated person? What would you need to do? Training, okay. So you'd want to train them. Empower them, I like that, yep, empower. Show results, okay. What does the entrepreneur want, right? Money, control, execution, like self-determination, right? Do you think your workers that you've got there now out on the floor feel that way? Do they feel like they can empower the outcome of the business? Do they feel if they work more, they're going to get more of that slice of the pie in your business, right? So that's the goal behind labor advantage. We want to get a frontline worker. So if you think about an Uber driver, right? What motivates them? The next fare, right? They want the stars, but they want the fare, right? So they're going to put them in situations where they can make more money and they can act against it and they can run their own business. So if we can get the mindset of the worker to start playing that game too, maybe not everyone in your building, but if we can get the receivers, check in, put away, pick, replenish, ship, pack, if we can get those individuals into a mindset where they're producing output and we're directly connecting their pay to what they produce versus the hours. They're still going to have to be clocked in, right, for legal purposes, from clock in to clock out. But if we can get them to arrive, on time, ready to go, 5 minutes in, they're crushing the pick right out of the gates, and the more they produce, the more they get paid, right? It just changes the whole environment of what's going on out on the floor, right? They're now driving their management team to get more work, to get them more of that activity, right? So how do we pay for output? Right, so right now out in your operations, you probably have lines per hour, cases per hour, pieces per hour, pallets per hour. You've got these different metrics, right? Would you be willing to pay people for those rates? So if I'm doing put away, would you be willing to pay me for my pallets per hour that I put away? Are there days when they can crush that number? Because they get a whole strip load and they can go 15 feet and put it into a big bay versus the next day now that fills up and they've got to go to the back of the warehouse, right? So I think I'm kind of directing you down the path of, how do we pay for that, right? So who did more work here, worker A, B, or C? So I'm picking, worker A did 500 cases, worker B did 200, worker C did 50. Who did more work, right? Clearly it's A, right? Everyone on board, they did more work. But that worker A only had to go to one location. So it's a one big pallet pull to get 500, right? Versus worker C went to 40 separate locations. So now who did more work? Do you do locations per hour or do you do cases per hour, right? Now how many aisles did I go in? Worker A just went to one location in one aisle. Worker C had to cover the building, right? Think about if you're an Instacart picker and you're going into a Walmart grocery and you get one order and it's 500 oranges, right? And the next order you've got 50 different items spread throughout the entire building. Right? How do we accommodate for that? Are we just going to pay for the cases or for the locations? Well, now look at feet traveled. Worker C went 2,000 feet versus worker A just went into one slot and they came back out. Worker B is getting lost somewhere in the middle. And then number of orders. Worker C took 10 orders through the building. Worker A did 1. These are real numbers. Like these really happen out in the wild. So who did more? Well, you kind of can't do it, right? You kind of need a system that will build that calculation behind it. So moving from cases per hour, lines per hour, we're going to move to time. So as you complete a task, as you walk a foot, as you pick a case, as you bend to get an item from the bottom versus the top rack, you're going to get time to complete that work. So doing the math behind the scenes, worker C did 62 minutes worth of work. Worker A did 12 minutes worth of work. It took them an hour to do it. Who was efficient? Right, worker C, they beat the standard, they beat it by 2 minutes, right, in that hour. Meanwhile, worker A they're somewhere in that -70, -80%. They're not even close to the mark, right? But because they hit their cases and they're in cases per hour, they look great, but it's just not much time. So that's where the labor advantage tool can calculate that. So if you look at a warehouse map, you think of Google Maps, right? Everyone uses Google Maps for directions. How does it know what's the shortest route, right? How does it calculate the estimated time to get it, right? Everyone uses that. It's pretty sweet. Labor Advantage uses very similar calculations behind the scenes. So it knows for every location, so look at the grid up on the ceiling. Each of those is a 2x2 grid. We usually use a 1-foot grid. So as you move from point A, you travel down the X, 52 feet, travel down the Y, 37 feet, right? And now we're going to do vertical, which I know is upside down, so we're actually flip down our feet on the thing. And okay, you're getting where I'm going, right? The Z is the Rubik's Cube. The Z is what comes out of the ground, right? So every location gets mapped. It seems like it's a huge issue. This big building, it's massive. That's about a week of engineering work to grid it out. It's not as hard as you think, right? Once you build an aisle, all your X's, my guy in services back there. He's like, it's harder than you think, Charlie. Right, James? Maybe more than a week for that building?
Maybe more than a week.
15 days. 7 days? It's not huge, whatever it is. That's a really crazy building. But a typical warehouse is about 5 to 10 days to XY out. And here's the thing. Once you get the XY calculation in, for picking, that's about 40% of your time. It's dead on. Like the labor expectation to go from point A to point B is dead on. And for most of the stuff that we've got out there, we already know the travel speeds, right? We know a human travels at how many decimal minutes per foot?
Decimal minutes?
Yeah.
2.78 miles an hour.
2.78, so 0.0041 minutes per foot, right? You didn't know it was going to be quiz time, did you? Eric, do you want to take over for him? No, okay. So once we get really accurate with the travel time, think of a fork driver. They're about 60% of their time is in travel. We nail that travel. So then all we need to do is pick up the other elements of the job. So with picking, 20% of our time is like order start, order completion. Another 20 is maybe the pick. Maybe it's 30% of the time is pick. Some of it is wrap up and finish, right? So we can start getting elements of what happens there, right? So if we can pick up an order time, if you think about grocery shopping again, you're going to have an order time to start an order, right? Now I know where I'm at. I got my XY point to get my cart. I'm going to get my travel to my first location, right? We got that nailed down. Now my pick itself, I've got a location time for, picking out the location, finding location. Then within it, the cube and the weight of the item and the storage medium that I'm pulling from is going to be my pick time. So I've got pick, travel, pick, travel, pick, travel, pick, travel, complete, travel up to the front. Now we've got a time to pack out that order. So we've got a lot of metrics we can play with there. We got cube, we got weight, we got number of items. So you've got a lot of things that can build the time that it takes to finish. Now we've got a drop off. Now we've got to travel back to a cart and get a new cart. So we build all the elemental pieces for that. Again, it sounds like a lot of work, but we do it every day. To do picking, we can do about 2 standards a week. So a typical warehouse is like 15 standards. We do the XYZ. Then we're knocking off 2 standards a week, but it's exact. So now we know what it takes to do most of the big elements of the work out on the floor. So looking at that standard calculation, it's based off a procedure. You got your order start, you got your pick time, your dynamic travel, a drop-off time for a tote or a pallet, and then we've got progressive fatigue. So as you do more work, you're working into the 9th, 10th, 11th hour, you're getting more time to do that same work at the end of the day. So if you run into overtime, you don't have to start adjusting people's output. The system handles that expectation itself as you do more work. And then we need the system to track time. So if you think about like that grocery store example, when does my clock start? Well, I'm going to get paid from a time and attendance system, so let's start with that. So we'll do a time and attendance punch for the start of the day. You're already getting that. Let's take that feed and push it to Labor Advantage. Now you've got your work, you pick up your gun, you go out and you do your picking. So now I've got all my time stamps from picking. Every single time I make a pick, I've got a time stamp. Now I go from picking into put away. The start of my put away becomes the end of my picking. So now I'm picking, put it away. Now I go on break. Okay, so let's put in schedules in the system for breaks. So I'm going to get my 15 minutes of credit twice a day, and I can see my performance around break. That's one of our big savings, is people taking longer breaks. You can see it like crystal clear in the reporting. If someone takes a 22-minute break, you'll see that gap. Not saying that you have to talk to them about it, but if they're not making performance, the first thing you look at is where are they gapping out throughout the days of start of day and break lunch. If I go on to an indirect, that's the first time I have to do anything for Labor Advantage. So far, it's all automatically feeding Labor Advantage. If I'm in WA, you're going to do a couple of day chunk of work to put an indirect screen on there. So you do a hotkey, and then you choose what the indirect code is. It knows who I am, it knows the timestamp, it knows what activity I'm going into. Now I've got visibility of all my indirect times. So cleaning, end of day, things that stop me. If you don't want to do that, like let's say they're on voice, you can take a voice feed through to the system. You can do a kiosk out on the floor. You can even do a little quarter sheet of paper where they fill it out, hand it into a supervisor, the supervisor hand keys it in. So there's a lot of different ways that we can track that indirect time, but we need the system to do that. We get more labor savings from utilization gains on the floor than we do from a worker working harder. The product, because it gives you full visibility of where every hour is spent out on the floor, you then know where to go get it. We know how much cleaning time we had yesterday, right? We had 500 hours of cleaning time yesterday. We can do that better, right? We can do it a different way. So the Labor Advantage tool, it is pressed out. It works. If you have WA and you have Pulse, we can go in with that Pulse and upload Jackpine dashboarding, right? It's like a day of work, and we just have to make sure that it's all pointed in the right direction. But if you've used Pulse, very user-friendly, very graphical. You can click and hover. You can take an existing report and modify it and save it as a new one. You can share it. But you can see right away who's doing what, right, throughout. You can do trending over time. So this is an example, that middle one, of efficiency throughout time and utilization. People are extremely predictable. Like, we always think that people's performance moves up and down. When we take old data and dump it into the system for like a month, people have the exact same habits every single day. People are very habitual. So if I'm losing performance, where am I losing it? Is it break, second break, end of day? Like, where is it? You can see it in the reporting clear as day. So now we talked about the system. We talked about how we're capturing data to feed it from WA into LA or from Edge or 3PL. We do need to build standards behind it. We talked about that, like being able to do about 2 standards in a week. The way that we can build it so quickly is we've got 1,500 sites of deployed standards and predefined flows. So we talked about 75 flows. We've got production standards built for almost every activity within the building. I know it's a lot of detail up on there. It's TMUs, time measurement units, la 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 la. We can train your team to use it and maintain it. Otherwise, we can just build it and maintain it. Just for size and scale of amount of work to maintain it, sometimes there's some flack on standards. We've got 2 people that maintain all of Frito-Lay throughout North America, and it's 150 sites. So one person can handle 75 sites a year of maintenance, right? If you're a 13-site company, you probably have 1 person that does it, but then they do other things, right? They do slotting, they do facility design layout, they do ROI analysis. They're using those standards for other things, but it's like less than 1 person per 10 sites, right, to maintain it. Before we build those production rates, we don't want to put a production rate on a broken flow, right? So during the partner event, I don't know if there's other partners in here, but they had me doing some picking. It was very simple. It was a scan, pick, move, and put to stage. But like, all the engineers kind of went after me afterwards because the staging was 10 feet away. We could have moved the staging right next to it. A barcode kept falling off the front. We could have labeled that to it. Right, are you with me? We're engineers. Like, this is like where we get excited. But we look to get like 20 to 30% efficiency out of a process before we even put a production rate on it. So we're looking at bending, traveling, walking, redundant activities. One of the things that we do is we come in with our WA expert. This is an actual customer. This was part of a 3-day lean event, and we identified 40 process flows in WA that could be quickly modified to drive process flow gains. And some of it is as simple as, if I'm going to a location and I'm going to scan the item, because that's their requirement, why am I scanning the location? It knows the location. I can't pick it from anywhere else. And if I did happen to pick it from anywhere else, does it really hurt me, right? It might throw off inventory for that one location. But let's get rid of the location scan. In that made up picking, I had to hit 1 enter for every pick. Why do I have to hit in 1? Let's just make it auto-populate with a 1, so when I scan the location, it confirms the 1, right? If it's not 1, then yeah, I'll key in 2 or key in 3, right? But it's just going to be a 1. So we're reducing steps, right? And can I do 3, 4, 5 picks before I go stage, instead of doing pick, stage, pick, stage? So it's just reducing and thinking about time and then cleaning up the WA flows. If you have WA and you don't like the process, it's your process. You've agreed to it. Either you built it or someone before you, but it's your process. You can build any process flow that you want. Let's take some time and spend it up front. So this piece of work is about $160,000. It will probably get them 50% labor gain just in their process flows, just by cleaning them up. Like one of the examples is it's a 5-touch receipt. We can conceivably get them down to a 1-touch receipt. They have 3 different people that are touching that product. Why can't the one person just finish it the first time they touch it, right? So it's things like that. It's like scanning a throwaway staging label, but then not using that staging label for anything. Sometimes processes get built, MVP, minimal viable product, to get it live, but there is a time to go back in and look at those flows to clean them up and get them tightened in. So you've got WA design enhancements, but then you've also got the physical flow, like we talked about. Can I travel less? We got a 50% gain. The way that we did that was we took a movement of all their items, really quick run. 15 of their items were 90% of their movement, right? Like 15 items was 90% of their movement in their e-commerce. Where are those 15 items? They're spread out throughout a 1 million square foot warehouse. Why? So we took those 15 items and put them right next to the pack desk. Then we took all their single line orders, and instead of being mixed into a batch of 6 orders that get picked at a time with the pick cart, we took all their one-line orders and made a super batch. So we took their entire run of their e-commerce, everything that's in the queue, if it's a one-line order, it gets batched together, and now instead of traveling the whole warehouse across orders, I'm doing a pick and pack. It's picked and packed. It doesn't even go to packing. We can completely skip the whole packing step and pick and pack and not even move, right? So these are things that work, and then with the batching itself, instead of taking 6 orders, we looked at the volume of the cube, and we moved it up to 10 orders, but now I'm doing multi-line picks, and I'm getting a lot of density because all my one-liners are pulled out of there. Right, so it's just like those types of things that we're looking to get in the process flow. So when people think labor, they think about the worker and how much the worker gets done. It's not. It's so much of the other stuff. It's the utilization, it's the process flow, it's the time management that you're getting from it, and it starts with that lean process. So now we've got a system that can track performance. We've got a good process flow. We've got an expectation of what it takes to do. Now it's up to the execution, right? Now it's up to the coaches, it's up to supervision. So it goes from being an IT project to an engineering project to a performance management project. And it's like if you think about your organization going through it, who brought us in? Was it IT? It's gonna feel a lot like an IT project until about the 3rd week, maybe 6th week, maybe 8. And then it's gonna feel a lot like engineering. And then it goes completely HR, coaching, goals, expectations, management, little league coach, right? You think about how you're coaching your workforce. How do you coach that little league? And we look to build that skill set in with that supervision. So the first thing that we do is we do 5 daily habits. So we're staff planning each day, and then 2-hour increments to make sure that we've got the right people on the seat where they need to be. We're maintaining that performance tracking edit. So we talked about the command center. That's really easy to do. It's about a minute per person. Then we do a daily floor walk, where after I review their performances, and by the way, you can do it on a tablet out on the floor as well. So you take that information and you go out on the floor. People want to post performance, right? Is posting performance a good way to motivate people? It might motivate 1 or 2. It's not going to motivate your whole team, right? There's certain people that go after it, and probably because you're in this room, you're one of those 2 people, but the whole rest of the team is not motivated by that. They're looking at where I need to be, so we don't want to post. What I want is a 1 to 2 minute conversation with each worker out on the floor where we review your day. Let's talk about what I did. You can see it. They want to know how they get better. Here's your command center. Here's everything you did. Let's look at what happened throughout the day. And then it's, hey, we did some observations, right, which is the next one on there. We do 1 coaching observation each day. It's 30 minutes to an hour. They dedicate to 1 person. They watch 1 person complete the job. They're looking at safety, quality, productivity. They're looking to see how that person works. I'm a coach now, right? Can you coach a basketball game without watching the game? No, but people do it all the time in warehouses. Let's turn into coaches. Let's go focus on 1 person at a time and see how I did. So you do that daily floor walk, and you do one coaching observation, like Scott said, a day. That's not on every person, it's just one person, and then review that indirect and delay. So when you first turn the system on, no one is used to reporting that indirect, and they won't report it until you start to hold them accountable to their outcomes, and then they start reporting it. So it's like one of the first things that shows up a lot of times is like, I don't have work available for me to pick at the start of the day. So now your supervision's got to come in a half an hour early and have work ready for them, right? Or, they keep pulling me off of work to go do this type of activity. Do we need to do that, right? So that indirect and delay is a big part of the savings from the program. And then if we look at just 5 fundamentals of that coaching, active listening, right? So if I'm ever in an engagement with the worker out on the floor, I want them to talk how much? Out of 100%, how much do you want that worker to talk versus the coach? Take stabs? Who do you want to talk more? The worker or the supervisor? Worker, right? 80%. You want that worker to talk 80%. So they say it, and then you turn around and say, this is what I heard back, right? That's active listening. Build trust and rapport. They have to believe that the number is fair and attainable. If they don't believe that the standard is fair and that it's attainable, you'll never get there. And so we build that through observation. We also open share everything that's calculated. You shouldn't have to be afraid of it. It's 12 seconds to do this, 18 seconds to do this, and they'll learn where they get time and where they don't. And they do goal setting, right? Everyone knows SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-bound, right, with the team. So as you're at -40, how do we get that person to go to 0? How do we get them to mentally commit to it? Constructive feedback, and then build on strengths. Just good 5 fundamentals. So if you look at industry norms, we talked about the average site turning on this like -25 to -40. That's it, historical performance. If we're just kind of, units per hour, cases per hour, and our quality of supervision is average. And the goal is to move to the top right corner. So you've got labor advantage deployed with engineered labor standards and individual incentives, getting to that +15. Pre-COVID, those are kind of the numbers. Post-COVID, we've got some sites that are turning on -50, -60. It's just we're paying more for work, and we've lost something, right, in the workforce. Like, the gap is greater than it was before. I think that's going to start righting itself. I think you guys experience more than me, but people are coming back to work. Their credit cards are full. The subsidies are gone. The bills are hitting. People are coming back to work, right? We're seeing the people here, and we're also seeing volumes drop a little bit too, right, in some sectors. So there's more people available to do more of the work, and that's going to help too. So quick case study. We presented this last year with a client. They've got 12,000 people, 210th largest private company in the US, 400,000 square foot distribution. They just did a recent expansion, 240,000. They had an old AS400, no incentives, no accountability. They were non-union, but there was some union pressure in the area. It's in a grocery in the Northeast, right? You're going to have union pressure in the Northeast, right? Timeline, we started work in March of 2022. We did lean early on and helped complete out the WA rollout and cleaned up the WA processes quite a bit. Did the process implementation, got WA rolling, hooking from WA to LA. Labor Advantage itself is its own system. That's why you can port it to Edge and 3PL. It's built as a complete standalone system. When you build it with WA, it's typically on its own server. An activity happens in WA, and we build hooks in that Visio process flow. And it's like 6 lines of SQL code. Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, right? About 6 lines of SQL code to create a hook to take that from WA to LA. It is real time. I know IT guys, sub-second, real time. Like, it's basically real time. So when you do that scan, it's passing time, activity, user over to this other system. And then once a day, we're sending things like location, people, unit of measures, like at the start of day. But then when you open WA, it folds right into the menu structure. So there's no additional training for the supervision or management. If you're signed into WA, you're signed into LA. But from an architecture structure perspective, it's a different system, which is why I can pick up and go to Edge and the 3PL. So get progression. They actually use the ROI from the labor The person that came in to run operations came from another one of our clients. He's like, I need labor. We need to get WA in now. So they used labor as the muscle to push through the WA go live. So we did the hooking, we built the engineering, selection turned on, so picking turned on December 12th, 2022. After 3 months, selection productivity was up 27% on picking. These are the real numbers. They did the lean process, engineered expectations, management visibility, HR accountability, the 5 daily habits training, and then incentives. This is their actual incentive payout. So for the actual incentive, if I'm at 106% performance, so 6% above the minimum expectation. We didn't really talk about what the minimum expectation is, but it's, like Jim said, 2.78 miles an hour. It's a pace I could do all day, all life, all career. It's not fast, right? If I put a treadmill here, 98% of you would be walking at 3.5 miles an hour. The standard's at 2.78, and on top of it, we put PF&D, personal fatigue and delay on top of it, and you've got other things like break starter day and things like that that apply. So when we say 105, that's 5% faster than 2.78 miles per hour, right? So it's not fast, right? If you walk at 4 miles an hour, you're at a plus 25, right? And that 4 miles an hour is very doable. Now, if I just stay on it and work with it, right? Walking makes up 40, 50% of my time. I can really beat the standard. It's in their culture. Their whole team is in here. You've got some people out there that work 50% in a grocery selection, 50% above a standard. They're picking up 3 cases of pop. You guys call it pop, soda, Coke, what do you call it? Pop. Pick up 3 cases of pop. I'm from Minnesota. And they pick it up, at a time, right? So they're earning it, right? They're earning that. And their program is very, very rich. It's almost a 1-to-1. So if you did 44 hours of work in 40, you get 4 additional hours of pay, right? That's a 1-to-1 program. This is not a 1-to-1 program. It's below it, but it's still fairly rich. So if I'm 5% above standard, for the day, I'm doing an extra 20 minutes of work, right? I'm going to pick up $1 an hour for every hour that I'm on standard. We're not paying them for the indirect. We're not paying them for the utilization or break or start a day. It's when they're on the standard. So they make an extra $1 an hour. So if they're there 7 hours, it's an extra $7, and they're producing an additional 20 minutes. So it's a pretty rich program, right? It's built to get them into it and get them going. So project highlights from that. The cases shipped went up 12%, so their volume increased, right? That's not them picking more, it's them selling more. But at that same time, at that 12% increase, payroll went down 20%. Hours went down 24%. Cases per hour went up 55. And if you think about standard grocery picking, it's about 150 to 180 cases an hour, so 55 is a big number. And then the cost per hour went up 4.9 because we're paying people more, right? They're getting incentive. Workers are making more, but the cost per case went down 29%. Like, these are real numbers. So they're saving $12,000 a week in that case. Pretty fun.